Have you ever practiced a super cool lick for hours and hours and hours just to find yourself totally unable to play it when recording or jamming? Hi there, I'm Chris, and this is a super common issue. Today we're going to discuss why it happens, what you can do to fix it, and I'm going to exemplify by jamming with some fancy licks over a backing track. And also, we're going to cover an irreparable mistake which you should avoid at all costs. So let's go. So whenever we as guitarists learn something new, we typically start very slowly to make sure our fingers and hands kind of grasp what they're supposed to do. We practice with a metronome, gradually increasing the speed. We're using a drum machine. And eventually we start feeling a bit comfortable. We practice more and more and we feel more comfortable. And then comes the point where we try to play this in a real kind of musical situation. Maybe you're jamming, maybe you're recording a solo, maybe you're, I don't know, playing live or something. And we realize that, hey, this doesn't work at all. I knew how to play this in my bedroom when practicing, but now it's like I totally can't do it, right? Or we, might be able to start the lick off, but then just mess up, or the opposite, we can't really get started with the lick, so we need several attempts to do it. And that obviously doesn't work when we're performing. So, a couple of reasons as to why this happens. First of all, when you're practicing with a metronome, you're teaching your hands what to do, and that's great. How to synchronize, and there's a bit of brain involved as well, because you have to make sure you're playing everything in a controlled and clean manner, and you want to play in time, so you have to start involving a bit of musical senses. But overall, you're not really telling your brain how to play this little lick or piece of music in a real-life musical situation. Because in a real-life musical situation, we wouldn't loop it over and over until we get it, right? Instead, we would maybe play it once or twice, and that's it. So already, maybe you can start seeing the issue here. You may basically mastered that lick with your hands and fingers, but your brain hasn't had a chance at all to practice including this in a musical setting. So that's kind of the first point here. You have to start practicing playing this in music, within a musical context, not just with a metronome, okay? That's the first thing. Now the second aspect to this is that whenever you're performing, you sort of have to nail whatever you're trying to do at the first attempt. Otherwise, it doesn't really work. Whereas with a metronome, what I find many people will just kind of play that lick and mess up a little bit the first 3 or 4 times before they kind of get into it. And I mean, that's okay when you're learning in the beginning, but in general, you should avoid practicing with mistakes. And the reason is, when you stand in front of an audience, you want to nail it the first time. So if you constantly need to play a lick 4 or 5 times before you nail it, then something is probably wrong with the way you're practicing it. In a good 90% of all cases, you're practicing it too fast. You have to slow down below your comfort speed. But just to recap, there are basically 2 reasons why you're unable to play whatever you're practicing in front of an audience or when jamming. And the first one is you haven't taught your brain how to use this lick in a musical context. Number 2 is you're not comfortable enough with this lick so you can just start it from 0 to 100 and be sure to nail it. And that could be because you practiced it too fast. Okay, so there are 2 very likely explanations as to why this happens. Now, how do you fix this? So I don't want to take away the metronome practicing from you. That's good. It's a good starting point. But when practicing with a metronome, you need to make sure you're playing at a comfort below your comfort speed. So that just means super slowly, while still maintaining the movements of a faster technique. And you need to, as soon as possible, move on to an exercise that is more musical than just doing. And the way to do that is, for some people, just maybe write a solo or just something, play your lick in the context of something that has like a song or a backing track or something that's more musical than the metronome. That's the first step. Now what I like to do is just to jam around that lick, because most of what I do when I'm not, recording for you guys or doing something like that is jamming. I love jamming, so I try to constantly get better at improvising and jamming. So I do exactly what we're speaking about now all the time. I learn a lick just by practicing it slowly, and then as soon as possible, I try to start including that lick into my jams. So I have a backing track for you today, which we're going to use to exemplify this. It's in the key of C minor, and I'm going to give the whole backing track to you. You'll find a link below the video. Yeah, sounds something like this. So it's in C minor. You can play your minor pentatonic box on the 8th fret here. I'm going to be relying on the C minor scale. So, and we're going to pretend that what I've been practicing is this. Like a shred pattern, right? And I'm able to do that with the metronome, but I can't play over a backing track. That's what I want to do. But I can't use this pattern in combination with a strong sounding melody or a slower lick or just something that makes sense musically. For example, maybe what happens is, okay, I need to say that, of course, I've been working for decades to avoid this, so sometimes it looks a little silly when I try to imitate failing. I guess I should be happy about that. I do fail a lot, but I've chosen a topic where I'm not as likely to fail because, yeah, I want to, show you how it's done. I don't want to show you how to fail. But for most people who are fairly new to the instrument, if they practice this kind of 6-note pattern, and I'm going to tab this for you as well, it's going to take a long time before they actually can start using it. And chances are, even though they might be able to play this evenly over a metronome, they're still not able to fit it in musically. And that's kind of the challenge here. So, let's move to the next step. We have our pattern, we have our backing track, but one part of the equation is missing. How do we mix those so that the end result is something you want to listen to? Well, when we're speaking about jamming, most of the time what the listener wants to hear is something melodic. They want a melodic carrier, something that carries a melodic message. The fancy lick we've been practicing does not really carry any melody. I mean, we can do it the Yngwie way, where we just do and just pretend that this is what people want to hear. But they don't really want to hear this. What they do want to hear is that kind of thing at the end, right? That's what you want to hear. And the fancy stuff just serves as a build-up towards that. It serves to enhance wherever you're going. So it's awesome to be able to play a fancy lick, but if you can't play that fancy lick in combination with something that really catches the listener's ears in terms of being melodic and being musical, then your fancy stuff is not that usable. So we have to make sure that the fancy lick we've been practicing leads to something melodic. And for that purpose, we're just gonna grab like four notes from the C minor scale. Let's do, that's the C, and then we just go down in the C minor scale. So 13th fret B string, 11th fret B string, and then 9th fret and 8th fret. So hopefully that kind of thing works. You can continue if you want to, but these 4 notes are enough to just exemplify. So, we want to play something like this. Whatever, baby, just simple. Whatever you want to do with those 4 notes, you play it slowly, add some vibrato, play with feel. That is a melodic carrier. So let's try to use our fancy licks with that. Okay, so that went by fast, I know, but the building blocks are the following. I was doing my fancy little pattern, which is just from the D string 12, 13, 15, and then from the G string 12, 13, 15, so a total of 6 notes. And my landing note was the melodic note sequence, or the start of that, which I just showed you. So it's the 13th fret B string. So I'm building up towards that 13th fret. So if I can kind of play that, nail that in time, then what comes after is hopefully a little bit easier, right? Because then I just have to play slowly. Something with those 4 notes. So let's try do it one more time. Here's my fancy lick. Okay, and here's my melody. So, what you have to do is the following. You have to make sure you practiced your fancy lick. You have to make sure you know where to go, so you need a melodic landing point, and then you have to practice putting both of those together. That's key, okay? So you do not master your fancy pattern until you can combine it with something that makes sense musically. Up until that point, what you're doing is just some circus trick. It's nothing to do with playing guitar yet. It's very close, so you've done a good job, but you're not there yet. You haven't crossed the finish line. So you need to keep practicing, but now in a musical setting. So, as I said, maybe you're not into jamming and you can just maybe write a solo, find a backing track. You can use this backing track and just write something. And I'm going to give you the scale shapes, the tabs, and the backing track. So you're going to be able to put it all together. And whether you want to jam like me or just practice the same thing over and over, that's up to you. But you really need to grasp the concept of using your fancy licks as build-ups that should be combined with something melodic. That's what this is all about. Okay, I know this is going to give birth to lots of new questions, and that's natural because this is a huge topic. But I still want to say that maybe you're wondering, well, okay, so there's a backing track, lots of chords happening. You said C minor, but if I improvise, how do I know that these notes are going to sound good all the time? And they will sound decent all the time because there's no key change, there's no modulation. So they will sound more or less good depending on lots of different factors. But if you're in tune, they shouldn't be totally off. So if you can play these 4 notes in time, you're going to be good. But this leads me to the one thing you should avoid at all costs when you're playing live or when you're trying to play some music. And that is to play your notes with bad timing or totally missing the beat whenever you're targeting a landing note, okay? So if you're using a fancy lick to build up towards something cool, but then that first cool note ends up not being on the beat, then you are screwed, okay? There's no way you can fix that. The only way would be to maybe try to keep on playing, but even that is hard. So the opposite, being totally in time, but not nailing a perfect note, that's not an issue. And that's why I said that as long as you play any of these notes in time, you're going to be okay. Now, it might not sound like the strongest note in the world if you targeted like one of the, there was a chord change and all of a sudden your root note is no longer a root note. It's maybe like, I don't know, a fourth or something. It's not going to sound as strong, But if you played it on time, no problem, nie mas problemas, you could just keep on going and no one's gonna suspect anything, especially if you're jamming, because you did a build up, you slowed down a little bit, and you kept on playing. Nothing weird there. But if you do a build up and like everybody hears, okay, something is happening now, this is supposed to take us somewhere. We're supposed to listen now because that dude just did, okay, listen, and then comes, it's like you're shouting to everybody, hey, look at me. And then you're just being silly, okay? So if you shout, hey, look at me, and you do your fancy lick, then you better take that listener to a new place. You better give them a reason for looking at you. And that's exactly why you need to practice playing this fancy run and then land on time. If you do that, you can get away with playing really bad notes. Let's try. Okay, so I'm going to use the same thing. That's a good note. That's totally out, but it worked. If I try to play, I'm basically going to try to mess up now. And in order to do that, I'm going to try to play something super fancy. I'm going to mess up, and we'll see if I can show you how it doesn't work when you don't land in time. Okay, that's a good example, right? I was supposed to land there, but nothing came out of it. So that's crap, basically. I didn't really, it was still on time. It didn't sound that good, but it wasn't totally off. So all of that's in time, that works. So I was playing notes that were outside of the scale, but it happened somewhat on time and I just got away with it. But I did manage to pull off one run there where I just messed up the ending. And I couldn't, the thing is I didn't hit any decent note at all, which is a step worse, or it's just as bad as hitting a note a bit too late and just not being in time. Now, the better you get at improvising, the better you get also at fixing your mistakes. You know, one note that's out of that's off timing wise, you might, you know, be able to do a bend or something, but in general, the general rule is if your timing is good, then your playing is good. Whenever you hear someone messing up, usually timing is off. So that's really the thing to look out for. And the reason I bring it up as a big issue here is I think that is likely, if we go into the detail as to why you're messing up when you're trying to play your fancy lick, it's probably because you're off timing-wise. You know, after the third attempt, you might be able to play your lick, but then you totally miss the train. Of course, if you're not ready to play the lick at all, it could just be a syncing issue, right? You can't hear any notes because your hands are not synced. But if you're past that stage, then most likely your timing is going to be off whenever you try to use your fancy licks. Okay, so this is a longer video than I had anticipated, but it's a good stuff here. So hopefully you've been following me here. I've taken you from the stage of explaining why this happens, you know, how we guitarists start off by practicing something basic, and then we need to build and we need to keep on building towards something musical. A lot of people, they just build towards when they stop practicing when they master something of the metronome. But again, that's just half the journey. You have to keep on going until you can actually use whatever you're practicing in a musical setting. And you're free to use the exact backing track I used here. It's by one of my co-instructors on one of my sites, guitarmasterclass.net, and it's Javier Aviles. He does awesome backing tracks. So check it out. It's a lot of fun. C minor. You can't go wrong with it. I've been jamming over this track hours just. And you can do your fancy. And all of that works really well. A lot of fun. So do give it a shot, and thanks so much for tuning in. You've been amazing. I've been Christopher Dahl. See you next time.